Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Courageous Leaders Club. And I am absolutely delighted to be introducing you to Jordan Adams. Jordan, thank you so much for your time to be here with us today.
Hey Joe, thanks very much. I know we just had a brief chat before, but I'm really looking forward to it.
No, so am I. And especially what we've just spoken about before, there's so much gold. I know what you're going to share is going to help so many people today. So thank you. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then we're going to go straight into this. Cool. But Jordan, you're, founder, investor, managing partner of 195, which I'll ask you to tell us a bit about in a moment. But before you went into your big career of entrepreneurship, which we're going to touch on a lot today, you started in Willington. Was it Willington PLC?
Willington.
Where you climbed the ladder really quickly and was their global head of sales. And it sounds like through your whole background, you just got this knack for marketing and sales. You work with lots of different organizations, helping them with their challenges. Yeah. But you're also a motivational speaker. We used it on panels, helping people overcome challenges, but also driving innovation as well in the MarTech space and digital space. Have I missed anything out there, or does that give you justice of what you've covered?
Yeah, I sound a bit more grand than I am. I think if I was to sum all those things up, I just like talking is probably about. But my background is sales, and sort of went up into a senior sales leadership role. So I've been involved in everything that comes with operationally running reasonably large businesses. Wilmington is a former FTSE 250 business. It's a very large company not many people have heard of. And then since leaving that role, the sort of classic, slightly bored, slightly wanting to, I like to be around lots of problems principally, so there wasn't enough problems. I've built and exited several businesses and currently founder and managing director of 195, which is a demand generation agency, primarily at technology companies.
Which is brilliant. And we met because you shared a post, it was Blue Monday, and you shared what the wonderful things you were doing for your team to really be there for them. And there was something you wrote about that you put your team at the front of everything you do. And that's where I just connected with you. I just thought that's the sort of people I want to be connecting with, putting on the stage to really share with people how you achieve that. And the first question, what we were just discussing backstage a minute ago, was it really sounds like you put a lot of value on creating the right environment for your people. And, connecting it to the courageous zone today is like that. It sounds to me like a really courageous environment for people to really come and show up and be their best. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that and what that looks like?
Yeah, it's such a big question because it's before you'd sort of reached out to me, and thanks for inviting me on. I hadn't really thought about it, but I think trying to create an environment that is people first, or trying to create an environment that allows people to be courageous, I just think it's about being authentic. I think you just need to, if you asked anybody to write down on a piece of paper things within their personal, their work life that were reasonably challenging, or things that scared them, or things they would like to achieve, we're creatures of habit. We all look pretty similar. Yeah. And if you can start to think about, well, the things that might stress me out, or the things that I might want to achieve that aren't linear personal to me, and look at your business, you'll find that you've got a lot of commonality. And the term that I use in the business all the time is, I might be at the front of the business, or I might be the founding partner, but I am human. And often leaders that are trying to build courageous environments, they forget that they're human as well. So a lot of what we try and do in the business, and a lot of what I try and promote, is with authenticity. And that often means delivering tough messages as well as nice messages, because that's authentic. But also trying to build a platform or an environment for people to have confidence. And we were talking about this just before we started. So I think building a courageous environment, and I can give some insight into it, is really around allowing people to feel confident. There's lots of ways that you can do that. And secondly, being authentic, particularly if you're a founder of a business that's your business. You need the authenticity. So we just work really hard on getting to know people on an authentic level.
And I think that's so valuable. And something you said is like, you're getting to know the people, but also helping the people get to know you. I thought it was lovely you said that when someone joins, it's all about helping them find their voice. What does that mean?
Well, I think it's two things. So when you join any organization or any business or any new environment, it doesn't matter if you're walking into a meeting or whether you're joining a new company or a new social environment, the first thing you've got to try and establish at a micro speed is the environment. So if you walk into a meeting, the first thing you're trying to do is judge the environment without even speaking a word. You're trying to assess how you're going to have to articulate yourself, where you sit at the table, and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of businesses forget that when you join a company, the individual might know what your business stands for or who they operate or the kind of people that work there, but they won't know the tone of the business. They won't know the pace of the business. So we worked really hard in the first couple of months or the probation period, just about encouraging people to find their tone. So they understand the level of comfort. They understand what you can push. They understand where the boundaries are. And by allowing somebody to know how they can communicate, and they suddenly quickly recognize, oh, right, that's why they've hired me.
Yeah.
Because they play back.
Yeah.
I understand the environment that I'm working in.
Yeah.
So allowing somebody to find their tone and understand the tone that they can talking in and the comfort level actually brings quite a lot of openness. Because the more you know about the environment, you can talk more freely, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can kind of come into that culture as being authentically you because you've been welcomed in that way, which I think is lovely. So there's a lot of talk right now. I definitely want to go into the entrepreneurship in a second, but there's a lot of talk right now about, with the pandemic and everything happening, the importance of people first companies now, really looking after your people. I was speaking to a leader this week saying that the level of relationships they now have because they've had to get to know each other as human beings. You know, we've all entered into each other's houses over this last year, seeing kids running in and everything going on.
Yeah.
For you, what have you seen as the difference of really making that a conscious thing in your company to put your people first? What business impact? Because just to give it a bit more context, I speak to some companies like, well, we're still a business to make money. We're still going to make money though. What would you say to that in terms of the impact putting your people first has on the business?
Yeah, it's great. So one of the things that I've seen in the COVID or the current backdrop that has been slightly frustrating for me actually is it's become a very hard environment to celebrate any success. It's deemed insensitive. And that I think is contrary to the challenge that we're all dealing with a little bit. I think, you've got to be allowed to celebrate successes in any environment. And yes, they need to be sensitive to the environment that others might be operating in. But if I sort of talk through what we did and give some practical ideas about what we did and what I think the outcomes were. So we went into the lockdown environment in our business in March the 16th. So we're coming up to a year ago initially. And I remember it clear as day. We grabbed our laptops, we all went to the pub, we sort of had a final goodbye, and then the next day we were up and running. And I remember giving a talk to the whole company the next day. Principally, all I wanted to do was explain to them that I've got the same information that you're receiving, but my job is to make sure you guys feel safe. So my job in all of this, however long this period is to absorb the pressure that comes from outside to you guys. So what we're going to do as a business is create our own cocoon, our own bubble. And if I can make that a safe environment and we carry on doing what we were going to do and we just keep focusing as if none of this was going on within our environment, then it should give you the headspace to be able to tackle the stuff that's outside of our bubble. So if our work life becomes quite safe, then the headspace means that you've got more time to worry about the other stuff that we were all dealing with. So we did a couple of things. The first thing we did is I removed my job title. Okay. I said, I'm not the managing director. I'm shoulder to shoulder with you guys. This is a human effort, human element. So, from a hierarchical point of view, let me, you guys come up or me come down. But either way, that's no longer my role in the business. Okay. The second thing we did is there was a number of people at the time that were in their probation period. And we immediately passed their probation. So they had no worries about furlough or whether they're going to lose their jobs. So we fast-tracked everybody's passing a probation. I think we passed people's probation within 48 hours of going into lockdown. Wow. So took that stress away from them. We asked all of our sales team to tell us their targets rather than us tell them. So you dictate where you think they are. And then the final thing that I said that we need to do as a business is we need to dial up on everything we do outward that we're still lights on as a business. And we just had an amazing reaction that we kept saying we're open for business, and we kept promoting what we were trying to do. We didn't change any of the environment we were trying to operate in. But all that we did, rather than take knee-jerk reactions, is throughout the whole of this pandemic, we've had the 195 blueprint. So we've not been second-guessing government announcements or otherwise. We can't control that. What we've done is kept plodding away and doing the piece we did. And then the final bit that we took away from all of the COVID environment was we saw lots of people jumping up and doing sort of pub quizzes and all of that sort of stuff, which is great. It's absolutely fantastic, but it is a long way from where you were as a business. So we didn't artificially try and replicate some of the stuff because we just didn't think it would work particularly well as an artificial piece. But the final bit I'd say around the COVID environment and what we did as a team, I remember reading quite early on, and lots of people I spoke to said, God, that's a really depressing stat. But history shows that if you look at any major, often once in a lifetime events, so the three that they were referring to in this particular piece was 9/11, the dot-com bubble burst, and then the most recent global recession. That what happens is a lot of businesses get caught in the headlights and they don't know whether to stick or twist on what's going on. So there was lots of talk that people will never get on planes again after 9/11. There was lots of talk that they won't put people in big buildings after 9/11. The dot-com crash, they said that big tech wouldn't hold the biggest market share. And then on the global recession, they said people won't buy houses. But what actually happens after global pandemics, despite all the talk, things go back to relatively normal. And I remember saying to my team that there's going to be a lot of talk that this is the new normal and or things are going to massively change. What we're going to prepare for is things don't change and then work out what good can come out of this, and we'll change the stuff that's good. So we didn't throw our keys into our office. We didn't suddenly say everybody all work from home for the rest of the time. We just bought our time. We bided our time. And when things that clearly worked, we went, cool, we'll adapt to it.
Wow. And even just sitting here just feels safe. It just feels like you've just created this lovely, safe place for your team to just breathe.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. You trying to create a safe environment, and particularly when you are remote, it's very, very hard for a start. Very hard to deliver tough messages remotely. So people start getting a false environment, and if you don't know how you're doing, people get nervous. So I spoke to many leaders who said, "Oh, it's a nightmare to deliver tough messages because you're in this situation." Well, that actually is false economy. Because people then can't work out if they're doing a good or a bad job. So that safe environment is probably the number one thing we did. Like in our world, let the only problems be our business problems, not other problems, because that's what we're used to. And it seems to have resonated, and there's probably lots of examples I can give you about what we did, but what we didn't focus on was trying to replicate false social occasions.
I think it's such a healthy strategy, and it's that wonderful quote is, focus on what you can control, not on what you can't control.
Right.
And I see so many people going into a spin, and I'm like, have you got any, can you control that? No. Okay, so you've got this energy, choose where you can put it and put it into something you can control. And it sounds like that's what you enabled your team to do, is put their energy in the right place. So they can then, as you say, have the space to think about what was needed for the business, but also the environmental stuff around them that was now changing. So huge acknowledgement for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. And our company mantra is what's stopping us. It's a great mantra because I can just say it to anything. So it doesn't matter what they tell me. I can just sort of play back, well, what's stopping us? But there is a lot of truth in it. There's nobody above us or left or right of us. So we sort of plot our own destiny a little bit. So yeah, that safe environment, it's tiring as the person that's sort of trying to be the protective layer. But it's no different to being a parent or anything else. You're just trying to absorb some of the pressure that gets to somebody that you care about. And that's how I see my team.
And just connecting it then back to the courageous, having this safe environment. And then I love that saying, well, what is stopping us? Because immediately I was like, I love that sort of what is stopping us. And you tap into well, nothing, let's go. What have you seen then that's helped your team, maybe go outside there, expanding their comfort zone and taking some braver steps? Have you seen that result from that sort of attitude?
Yeah, so there's that reasonably famous sort of graphic, isn't there, about comfort zone and sort of getting out the fear zone and moving forward. So I think when you're trying to, the term I use, when you're trying to push people out of the plane, that's normally because you know what the landing's like and they don't. But half the challenge with doing that is if you are constantly just trying to encourage people to be courageous by doing things they've not done, they can't work out how far they've come. So the way we encourage people to be more courageous or gain more confidence, sort of intertwined, is to show them how far they've come. So we spend as much time reflective of where we've come from as we are going where we're going to.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of, do you remember when you first walked through the door of our business, what you look like? By look like, I mean sort of the environment you're in. Do you remember when we first told you this was your target and how much you worried about it? Do you remember when we said go on a plane and go and have this meeting? You know, we constantly reflect backwards because then people can go, all right, I've come really far. And I think a lot of confidence and courageous building type platforms are constantly pushing out the plane the whole time.
Yeah.
It's great. And people do learn when they land safely that, wow, I can do it. But you have to keep reminding them that they've fallen out that plane in order for them to move forward. So we've seen, I think probably the biggest thing we did was increase the frequency of previous reflection.
Right, okay. There's that sort of assurance as well, isn't it? People just reminding you can do this. I call it, I think you've frozen a bit there. Oh, you're back. I call it stacking the evidence. So you keep stacking evidence that, oh my God, yeah, I can do this. I've done it before. I can go again. You know, and I think that's brilliant. A reflective strategy is to allow them to propel forward. I think it's lovely. I really like that. You've mentioned the word confidence a few times. I know confidence is something that's become very important to you in your life and where you work with people. Do you want to expand on that a bit? Because I think courageous and confidence kind of marry together really well. How has confidence become so important in the work that you do now with people?
Well, I think a lot of management books or leadership books or coaching is based around the sort of 10,000 hours piece, and then how can you deploy 10,000 hours of experience to your team? And the second part that you see a lot is surround yourself with great people, and let them do the sort of great thinking, so to speak. But I sort of take a slightly different tact around the confidence piece, because what I've noticed is when you are at certain ages in your life or you're at certain experiences in your life, really what makes that stressful is the confidence. Confidence to make a decision or too many people around you trying to tell you that decision. But intuitively, you actually know what's right or wrong. So if I think about my own personal life, it took me years to realize that actually I wasn't a particularly confident person. I thought I was confident because of the kind of work I did. I was told very early on you should be in sales and sort of all of that outward stuff. But from a personal point of view, I wasn't that confident. I'm incredibly confident, hopefully not arrogant in certain environments. Talking to you is not something that I would lose sleep over thinking about, but to others it would frighten the life out of them coming on and sort of trying to freestyle a conversation. But I was saying to you off air that putting me on a table at a wedding and asking me to make small talk, of course I can do it. But there's inertia that is not naturally confident. So how I've seen it in the workplace and what I try and encourage people in the workplace to do is when anybody joins our business, my main piece is whenever they leave the business or they progress through the business, that I can see that their confidence has grown. Because in my opinion, confidence is the thing that allows you to pull different solutions off the shelf and be able to implement them. And, you know, I've got a young daughter, and the whole piece around that is not to overeducate her. It's to give her the confidence to be sort of free-spirited and do what she wants to do and be creative with that, not to keep showing her the way that I do things. So children are a great example that they tend to have huge confidence. It's only when you start telling them what to do and not to do, they lose their confidence.
Because they start questioning what's right, what's wrong,
Right. So if you encourage people to put their best foot forward and you do all the classic stuff, which is, you know, no mistakes are bad mistake type management, what you actually find is people's confidence comes and they start to make decisions. If you conversely do the other way around and overeducate people or, you know, give too many pointers around something, despite the fact that you've got the most experience, what you actually do is drill out their confidence, and they become nervous to put a step forward. So our management style and the way I try and get confidence to work in our business is absolutely passionately talk about what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. So I relay that message 10 times a day, constantly what we're trying to do. Literally 10 times a day, I'll say, do you remember what we're trying to do the whole time? Mm. And then you say to the individual or the team or the department, you know, we're currently at this milestone and we're trying to get to that milestone. Go get the milestone bridge. Go and work the gap between the two, but empower them to know where we're trying to get. So I'd finish with this, that it's a very cliched thing to say, but you often hear things like leaders are the pilot, leaders are the sort of captain of the ship, and their job is to steer through choppy waters. I don't believe that at all. Mm. Nobody remembers a flight that's really, really bumpy, or if you've got fear of flying at all, until the pilot says we're about to land and the temperature's 35 degrees and it's going to be a beautiful day. All of a sudden, that's all gone. So I don't think the job of a leader is to be the pilot. I think the job of the leader is to describe the destination you're going to end up at, because that's overall why people get on planes.
Yes.
So your management are the pilots. Your job is to describe where you're going the whole time.
Yeah. Which then connects with what you shared to me, is being that visionary.
Yeah, it sounds rather grand, that title, right? But I think it's just, confidence comes from selling the vision.
Yeah. And I think, and do you notice, I definitely noticed that, first of all, I see a lot of people struggle to set a vision, and they kind of overcomplicate it, or it gets like, is it big enough? Is it not big enough to sell a vision? But then it's all like the vision's done, and then it sort of goes in the bottom drawer, and everyone then just gets busy. It's just busy doing, surviving every single day. Have you noticed that pattern in the sort of people you work with?
Yeah, I think one of the things a lot of people that I've managed sort of say to me is, how do I become a visionary department leader or a manager or executive? And that just goes back to the authenticity piece about what you're trying to do. And I think typically when it comes to vision, it's either be the biggest or the best, or it's do something that's got social impact.
Yeah.
Very rarely is it about the environment that the business operates in. So we sort of, basically my vision has always been that we want a business that genuinely is the best place you've worked at in your career. So that's what we just work at. Everything else takes care of itself. And I know it's a very, you know, it doesn't work for VCs, it doesn't work for P&L. But if you just try and create an environment that's really easy, you know, are we the best environment that you've worked in? Or certainly the most memorable for the right reasons? Then everything takes care of itself. But from a vision point of view, I personally believe that, you know, I get asked two things all the time. I mentioned one of them. One is, how's the business doing? And the second thing is, what are you going to do with this business? I don't get asked how am I doing very often, which is intrinsically linked to often how the business is doing. But when I get asked a question about where the business is going, or what I'm going to do with the business, I always say to people, it will be a feeling that I know that we've got there. And that's the money can't buy thing. And at the moment, I know we're not there because the feeling's not quite there, but I'll know when we've got there. So I think from a visionary point of view, without sort of just not giving practical examples or waffling examples, is you need, we have, everybody in our business has a number that is involved with the bigger vision. So everybody has a number. And that number's not just sales numbers, it could be anything. And everybody knows that that number plays a part in the bigger number. And these numbers aren't P&L numbers. These are numbers that are relative to whatever we're trying to create as a visionary piece. Every department has a mantra that spins into the bigger company vision. And I'd feel pretty confident you could go to anybody in the company and ask them where we are and where we're trying to get, and they'd be able to clear to play that back. But crucially, they'd be able to explain what their role is in us getting there. But none of it is pinned to turnover.
No. But would you say that by doing the way you do it, it means you can achieve the turnover you want and the profit you want?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the start of every financial year, we have our annual kickoff. And the bit that I always finish on is what I'm going to deliver as a leader. So I say, these are the things you hold me accountable for. So at the end of the 12 months, if I've not delivered these pieces, then you should be knocking on my metaphoric door and saying, Jordan, you said you would deliver these things for us. Right. So the minute my team don't believe that I believe we can do it, it's game over. Yeah. So the accountability piece and how you drive a vision as a leader, you have to go back to your team and say, hold me accountable for these things, whatever it is.
Which I would say is very rare. I would say one of I come up like you do, confidence is a big problem that comes up a lot. But another big problem I see in business, in companies, is accountability.
Yeah.
How do you hold us people accountable? And I'm like, and I look to the leader, I'm like, well, are you held accountable? Do you hold yourself accountable? Does anyone hold? And it's like, if you're not holding yourself accountable, how is anybody else in the company going to hold themselves accountable? And I just love the way you framed it, because I don't see many people do what you do, or you just described.
Well, that's really kind of you. I think a lot of the ideas that I have, I suspect that 90% of them wouldn't have made it through if I'd gone outside my four walls and asked other people's opinions.
Right.
Lots of things. I often see sort of best companies to work in and what they do. And without any air of arrogance, we've been doing these things for years. Lots of stuff that I see. I don't need to be told to just give my team a random day off to look after themselves. Most of the things that are deemed workplace of the future, we've been doing for a long, long time. Yeah. And it's not because I second guess it, it's because we're just checking if it's working for us. So I just ask whether it's right. But it goes back to the authenticity. It goes back to being human. But I suppose to the point that I'm trying to make around accountability is probably the biggest thing that I pride myself on a personal note, that I've sort of managed to eke out throughout my career. And believe you me, I've made lots of mistakes, but the thing that I'm proud of the most is I would feel very confident, again, without arrogance, but very confident if you asked anybody that works around me and or in my team, do they believe I, Jordan, will get where I need to get to? They would say yes. They wouldn't back against me. And that's the thing that I think encourages my team to believe that I trust Jordan. I think we can get where we get to. And when I put numbers down or ideas down and people go, wow. And I go, look, I know this is a bit crazy, but it's only when we get there that people start to go, right, I trust that we can do this stuff. But the accountability's got to be part of it, Joe. Leaders have to say, look, hold me accountable for this.
Yeah. And own it and take responsibility. And I think the key word you shared just there, trust. If there's no trust, I use a lot of level thinking stuff, and I go into an organization and straight up I'm like, what you've just actually hired me to do, we need to park that, because number one, there's no trust. So we need to trust first, because actually you're going to waste your money with me, because this will fall down if you try and do this now.
Yeah.
So being able to assess that trust and that levels of trust is so important. Jordan, what I'm so curious is, like, I really love the way you work and the way, I know you don't necessarily wrap it up as leadership, but the way you choose to be with your team, hold yourself accountable on what you believe in. Was this instinctive to you? Were you sort of just born with this thinking, or have you had great mentors, or have you been in companies where you've learned some of this stuff? How have you got to where you are?
My career has sort of almost been one company before I set up my businesses. But I was saying to you just before we started that I left home very young, and I don't think that, well, I certainly didn't think until recently that it played any part into the way that I've turned out. I just saw it as normal and sort of cracked on, and with no air of sort of poor me or anything along those lines. So there is something inertly built around the ability to be able to cope and do my best work with my back against the wall. So often situations that can be stressful for individuals, I might not see as stressful. Okay. So that allows me to absorb that piece. The second thing is, because I sort of had a young start on sort of having to get an old head on very young shoulders, my decision-making can tend to be quite quick and ahead of the curve a little bit, so I can sense stuff. And the final bit that I can't quite pick off, but there's an intuition in the business. I don't need to speak to anybody, and I can feel the temperature in the room. And there's some management indicators we have that I can judge that. But where it's come from, I had a couple of managers in my past role, my career as I call it, that really believed in me, that encouraged me to sort of go out and do things, which was great. And part of that was sort of ripping some of the rules that others had to adhere to allow me to do what I wanted to do, because they just knew I wouldn't do it the way they asked me to do it. But the second bit is I've hopefully got a caring nature about me, but most people have a caring nature about them. But I just keep going back to the classic, just treat people how you'd like to be treated. It's fantastic you've asked me to come on this, and it's it's very nice that you've recognised some of the stuff that we do. It's nice things to do, but I just see it as being human.
Yeah.
And I can't really distinguish that it's great leadership or it's different, because it's how we've always done it. And to the trust thing that just to pick back up on the trust thing, when I work with businesses that are slightly smaller in size, that unlikely to be startups, but maybe 30 to 50, maybe 100 employees and that sort of scale of money, the thing I always say to them is do the company credit card test. Because I could give anybody in my company the company credit card and say, go for a night out. Mm-hmm. And so many leaders would go, what? I wouldn't do that. They'd spend thousands. Well, that tells me where your trust level is.
Yeah.
So it's a real simple test of, would you give your company credit card to anybody in the business and say, go and have a night out? Because if you wouldn't, there's a trust issue.
Oh, completely. I fully agree. And also that was responsibility issue as well. And for you, it just made me think of something else that I'd like to get your view on, especially when companies get larger, and sometimes the cultures can start to get a bit messy and a bit holy as new people come in, and it's just busy, so they're not brought in properly, they're not finding their tone of voice and things. What's your view on, I see a lot of companies start to make exceptions. Oh, well, we won't pick them up on that because they're talented in this area. Or we won't deal with that. Or we'll just let it go under the carpet. What is your view on making sure that everyone is treated fairly and equally and there are no exceptions? You're either all in or you're not. What's your view on that?
My view on it is it's very difficult. I mentioned at the start that I'm involved in a number of businesses, but my core business, we're going through that stage at the moment. We're going through, we've sort of done the tricky teenage years, but we're going into that sort of early 20s years when it's, life becomes a little bit looking left and right, and who's getting married and who's got a decent job and who's bought a house. So you become a bit unsure in that period of your life, in my experience. And we're going through that as a business at the moment. And funny enough, we're going through an exact task at the moment that allows us to make sure that culture to one side, how do we ensure in a fair level playing field that people are being, I don't like the word fired, but hired and fired on the same piece that the sort of founders of the business came in through. So we're actually, the whole company is involved in this exercise at the moment, which is what do we pin to make sure that as we scale with people in different roles, experiences, backgrounds, countries, and all of that, how do we have that common thread? So my view on it is it's bloody difficult, I suspect. How I think you do that, I don't think it's about trying to replicate what you've got and keep trying to find people that look the same or fit in. I think that's very, very hard to scale. But I think it's you can find some common traits. A manager I worked under many years ago would only hire people that he felt were coachable.
Okay.
And he used to say to me all the time, Jordan, be coachable. And it was an amazing mantra, because he would hire people with exceptional talent and people that had an amazing get up and go, but they were all coachable. They were humble enough to go, teach me this thing.
Yeah.
So I think the scale there is you've got to build some form of framework or scorecard that you can benchmark people against, that's blend of culture and skills, because otherwise you do end up in a situation where somebody's exception in the business that's causing chaos.
Yeah.
I think it's Netflix, their sort of famous mantra was no arseholes. Yeah. And as soon as somebody became one, they would remove them, because it didn't matter how talented they were, they just upset the apple cart. So my view is I think it's bloody difficult, is the truth.
I think it's very difficult, but the minute that companies do make exceptions, more and more holes start appearing.
Yes.
Yeah. And that trust starts to go, the fairness starts to go, and the or that water cooler gossip starts to happen, and your silos and your pockets and everything. So it's very hard, but I do think that's where a lot of courageous leadership comes in, is there's no arseholes, and we stick, if we say that, we live by it. And I think as soon as you say something and you don't live by it, that trust in you as a leader or trust in you as a company, I think just starts to disappear. It really does.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we're talking lots of positives here, but part of my role is to make decisions around trying to ensure that there's a level playing field for everybody, but also encouraging people to stand up and not everybody doesn't need to progress at the same level. That would just be ridiculous. But there's common pieces that I'd say if you're a leader of a business and you're hearing somebody's name infrequently or frequently, you've either got a good or a bad problem. So if I might, currently in my business, I haven't got this issue, but if I've got somebody's name coming across my eye line all of the time, there's usually a challenge there. Now, if it's reaching me in my so-called lofty heights, then there's clearly, I've got to assume that that's been magnified 100 times in other places in the business. And it is your job as a leader to not ostracize or isolate that individual, but to get to the bottom of what is causing it. Yeah. Because I've seen company cultures, and I'm sure you have, and particularly in the work that you do, fall apart because that person might be overperforming in another environment, and all you're really looking at is the business growth as opposed to what you've worked so hard to create initially.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to putting your team at the front of everything versus the numbers. The numbers are important, but that one person could affect then everything, which I think is just a bigger picture of what's happening in a company. So look, checking the time. Oh gosh, that went so quick. I could sit here and talk to you all day, Jordan.
I told you.
It's so insightful what you're sharing, and I'd love to know if you could now give your younger self some advice through everything you learn, all the conversations you're now having, and how you're helping people. What was that piece of advice you'd love to have given your younger self?
You did actually say to me, you might ask me this question. This is the one I actually had to really think about. But I think it's you can plan ahead, but assume that plan will change when you get there.
Yeah.
My business tends to be, we've got a reasonably young workforce, and our model in the business is we don't hire anybody that's done the job before. So it's a very simple piece. We want to bring people into the business that haven't done that job, but give them the chance to do that job. And it works brilliantly. So you can recruit grads all the way up to senior executives that have never held senior executive roles. So that's been our mantra. And the reason why I did that is because until I started this business, I'd never ran a company. So how can I be in a role that I've never done and then ask other people to not do the same? So the biggest thing that I see in the business is people, particularly in a certain age bracket, are so consumed about trying to plan out what their future looks like. And it's easy for me to go, trust me, it doesn't end up how you think it's going to end up. So I think younger self would be, you can sort of have it all, but try and do it in one step at a time.
Yeah.
Plan, but just accept that when you get there, the plans might change, because I think people over engineer stuff and doesn't allow them to be free. So that would be the advice I give myself.
And that's brilliant advice. And wow, I've never heard anyone say that they hire people in a job that they've never done before.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Every single person in my company, every single person has never done the job before.
What does that involve, you needing to then make sure they're set up to succeed then? Is that taking them more of your time to help them, or making sure they've got a mentor, or just letting them go and just be about being, you've got a culture that embraces mistakes, so that's part of your growth? How do you set that up for success?
Well, you're onto a good thing straight away, because you are giving somebody an opportunity that they might have shortcutted because you're giving them the opportunity earlier. You're giving them the opportunity to use skills that often they might have been frustrated in another business they couldn't use. But the biggest thing you're doing is giving them belief. You're saying to them, look, you don't need to worry about whether you can do this job. We, whoever the hiring person is, we believe you can do the job. So don't worry if you can or can't. That's down to us. It's not down to you. So we have, we can obviously train people. We can mentor people. We've got all this classic infrastructure piece in. But I just felt it was so important that if you're going to be authentic, and somebody says to me, well, Jordan, you've never run a company before at the time, how can you go and hire all these people that have done the job when you haven't done the job yourself?
It's brilliant.
So that has been our company mantra, and that will remain as long as I'm leading this business. It will be, we do not hire people that have done the job before. And my God, does it bring a fresh set of eyes when you do that?
Yeah, I just think, like, what a gift you're giving to people. And I think that belief, if you just said that, giving that people belief. I was speaking to a team the other day, and I'm like, how differently do you work when you feel trusted? And they were like, oh my God, like, we fly, we're great. And like, so how do you work when you don't feel trusted? Oh, we just overthink, we hide, it's just, as you say, giving those people that belief you can do it, and we've got your back no matter what. Like, I think for me, that completely sums up for me in my world, courageous leadership, of being able to do that for somebody.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, you know, I hope it hasn't come across that we're sort of this business that doesn't make mistakes, or everything is sort of almost new age hippie type stuff. It's not. You know, I come from a corporate background. We've got frameworks and processes and all the other stuff that you would deem that look normal. Yeah. But at the heart of it, you know, we are just people. And I wouldn't say we don't have anybody in HR in my business. We haven't got a HR function. We haven't got a learning development function. We haven't got somebody driving this agenda. Mm. It's just a business that I just want to be authentic. And I want my team that if I've got to deliver a tough message to them or an individual, that I can still go to the pub afterwards and it's all fine, because that's what friendship groups are. That's what human nature is. You don't stop speaking to your best mate if they tell you that, you know, maybe you got drunk the night before too often. You know, you've got to be authentic with people. So I hope that's come across. But my advice is just be authentic. You know, build a business authentic to what you've got in front of you. Yeah. It goes a long way.
I think it's wonderful advice. And I just want to say thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. You've opened my eyes up to new ways of thinking. And I know for the people watching with us live, the gold you've shared is so valuable. Thank you so much for bringing your full authentic self to this interview. I am incredibly grateful. Is there any final parting words you'd like to share before we close?
No, but I suppose really the biggest thing that I see that I'd encourage those that are either entrepreneurs or leading a business or trying to set up a business or trying to make a life decision, try and get less people around you rather than more. Because the more people you have around you, the biggest mistake I've made was had too many people around me trying to give me advice in the early days. And that's not because I didn't need the advice. So my advice is, when you're trying to make a big life decision, you make that decision. And when you understand the certain areas within that decision you don't have expertise, then get the experts in. Don't get experts in to make your decisions for you, because you'll end up losing your confidence about what you know intrinsically is right. So that's my big advice. Whether it's you as an individual or whether it's you as a business leader, don't take lots of people's views. Take lots of people's views when you know what you want their view on.
Yeah, that resonates with me so much. It's exactly what I did 3 years ago. I was asking left, right, and then I lost sense of what I then thought was what I wanted to do. Brilliant advice. I now have less people around me, and it's made a massive difference. So listen to that, people. It's the best advice. It really does make a difference. And thank you so much. Thank you for those who've watched live with us, and we will see you next week for another Courageous Leaders Club. Jordan, have a brilliant rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll get to chat again soon.
Pleasure. Thanks, Joe. It's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Take care, everyone.